servant leaders, during which we reflected. We started with a mass, and then for the whole day we tried to discern what God would want us to do for this year. And that was the theme. It was given to us. Luke 5, chapter 4.
Hindi ko alam yan. Hindi ko alam.
I was because, God manifests Himself in so many ways, but not so direct. That message really is very close to our hearts because that's our marching order for this year. Put out into the deep. Just a trivia with regard to that reading. It speaks about Peter and the rest of the fishermen with his brother Andrew, James and John Zebedee, sailing out the night before to try to fish. And they, as you know, they were expert fishermen. That's their livelihood. But despite their efforts, they didn't catch a fish. And so they saw Jesus, and Jesus saw them, by the way, by the shore, just cleaning their nets. And then Jesus asked Peter to move his boat into the deep and cast his net and prepare for a catch. That's exactly what that verse said. And you can understand the thinking of Peter at the time. Obviously, he doubted, di ba? Because how could that be? Every fisherman knows that the best way to catch a fish is in the evening, when the fish are all so close to the surface. In the morning, where the sun is hot, they settle down deeper. So it's like it's almost impossible for them to prepare for a big catch. But because Jesus said so, what Peter did was to obey. And that opened up the possibility of a big catch, and it did happen. So I think, and actually we can relate to what you're undergoing right now. Weeks or even a few months before we bolted from CFL, we were in the same boat. We were looking for a community. Actually, we almost ended up considering a French-sounding name, no? Catholic, but in French. In French, originating from Paris, but has some chapters in a few parts of the world. So we're saying, oh, this could be our community, because at that point really we were really confused. But then God always makes things clear to us and to you, I guess, eventually. And I don't know if you'll believe this, the reason why we say there's no founder is really there's no founder. Because the decision to bolt, actually, and more important, the decision to come up with a new community, at that time we didn't even know about the name, was on the birthday of Mom Mary, September 8. We didn't know. We started meeting September 7 in my house with all the leaders gathered well, let me introduce first myself before I go on. I'm Chito Liban. My wife is Maribel here. Yeah. We're both lawyers.
Right.
At the time we decided to get out of CFL, I was the head of district servant of Novaliches, which is the biggest in Metro Manila. And I had been in that position from the beginning of 2007, at the time of the split. I was also the head of the legal group of CFL. I had the good fortune and privilege of defending all pro-life organizations during the great RH case before the Supreme Court. I was asked to argue before the Supreme Court, and I would like to say that I did it. Of course, I was so scared, but I prayed, and I took hold of God's promise that don't worry. Remember what He said to Moses when Moses was trying to get away from the predicament of him being called to talk to the Pharaoh and to tell the Pharaoh to let my people go. He said, I couldn't speak. I stutter. But Yahweh said, don't worry. Who created mouths? Who created words? I'll put words into your mouth. So that was my strength. And, well, as God would have it, it was a success for religious people, for what we call religious objectors, because the provisions of the law, which would imprison or penalize anybody who disobeys the RH law or who says anything against the RH law, has been nullified by the Supreme Court based on religious freedom. So for that, I think God really is somehow watching over the Philippines as well. Because in the US, I know that there's no such thing. Actually, the pro-life group, with regard to that issue of religious objectors, has not been quite successful. Your government is starting to differentiate between the right to religion and the right to worship. The track right now is to give, like for instance, all of us Catholics the right to worship, but not the right to religion.